All right, welcome back to another episode of OnShape Help. Today, like I discussed in class, I'm going to show you guys how to make holes in OnShape the right way. Previously, we had been using the extrude tool to make a room like in Activity 1.2.5, um, but now we're going to do it the right way using the actual hole tool at the top of the toolbar here. So, like I explained in class, this allows us to make our blind holes, our counterboards, and our countersinks that we weren't able to do with just using the circle tool with the extrude. So the first thing to note about the hole tool, if you hover over it for long enough, it pops up with this tooltip and it tells you it can create a simple countersink or counterbore in parts by selecting sketch points or make connectors. So like I said, make connectors will come in unit 2 when we start doing assemblies. So for now, we're going to focus on sketch points. So I'll show you guys real quick. Let me get rid of this and get rid of that. I'm going to show you guys how to make a hole. So after I make a sketch, right, some type of extrusion that I want to put a hole on, I'm going to again hit a new sketch. I'm going to select the face of wherever I want the hole to be as the sketch plane. And I'll right click and I'll hit view normal. And then up here I have this point button. And this point is exactly what it sounds like. It just makes a one-dimensional point on your sketch. So if I want to add a point, I can click anywhere on the sketch and I'll make a new point. And these points are going to be able to help us do a lot of things, namely, making a hole, but we'll also be able to use it to project a curve onto or make a new sketch plane later if we need to. So now that I have my point placed, I can just confirm my sketch and I'm good to go. And I'll come back to my hole tool. And you'll notice if I try to select anywhere else in my drawing, it does not highlight anything, right? This is what a lot of people were running into trouble with when we were doing our projects, is that you were trying to use this tool because, well, it says hole. You want to be able to make a hole. You would think that you could just use this tool to do it. But in fact, if you don't make the sketch point or make connector like it specifies, then you're not going to be able to do anything. Now that I have my point, if I hover over it, I'm going to see that it highlights. And when I click on it, it's going to default to making a simple hole, right? So that's no counterbore, countersink. It's just sort of looks like that extrusion that we already made. And it'll default to a through hole, okay? But I can also choose, there's a couple like blind and last, up to next, up to entity. We won't really go over that. We're just going to look for through and blind. So if I want it to be a blind hole, a hole that only goes partially into my object, I'll see that it does that. And if I spin this around, well, my blind hole, my depth must be a little bit too large. But if I change it to 10 millimeters, then it doesn't go all the way through. And one thing to notice is that this tip style angle, right? These are industry standards. The 118, that's what we saw in class. You also have 135 or flat. Those are industry standards. So we don't really care. We can just leave it as 118 degrees. And if I wanted this to be a counterbore instead, I just select my counterbore option. And now I have options to change my counterbore diameter and my counterbore depth. So maybe I want my counterbore diameter only to be, let's see, 7.5 millimeters, right? And it'll shrink up my counterbore depth. I can also make a countersink. Remember, a countersink is sort of like a counterbore, except it makes that conical cutout, right? That conical cutout that I can change the angle of. So it defaults to 90, but we saw in class, I think the one that we looked at was 87. So you can make a slight change, you can make it 50, any number that you need. So, and if we wanted to change the countersink diameter, of course we can do that with this option up here. And that countersink is just there to accommodate a angled screw head. But that is how you make a hole the right way in OnShape. Now I can confirm that. And to recap what I did here, I created a new sketch. That sketch is just a point, and I use that point to create my hole. I hope this video helps, and I'll see you in class.